Welcome back to this Elijah Sunday Talk Show here on the Arise News Channel. With me, I have Professor Adamolekun, Director General, Bulitac Center for International Diplomacy and Strategic Studies. Professor David Aworawo, Professor of International Relations and Strategic Studies at the University of Lagos, and Yemi Adamolekun, Executive Director. Enough is enough. Well, Prof. Yemi, you've been listening to the program since the beginning. We had Honorable Emmanuel Ego talking about the proposed bill at the House of Representatives, saying that, look, if you are a medical doctor trained in Nigeria, then you are in bondage for 5 years, compulsory practice. I don't know. If you add that to National Youth Service, that's like 6 years. Even when the Nigerian government has not been responsible for the payment of your fees. Okay? So what do we think about that? And he also talked tangentially, I think, about ethnic politics in Lagos. He being the representative at the federal constituency for Aworawo in Lagos, where he lost in the last election, but it seems he's not bitter at all. He says that's not a problem. You know, we can all move ahead. And then, of course, we had a second guest, who addressed the issue of subsidy removal. Okay? Nigeria, we asked him, Nigeria has now collected $800 million from the World Bank.
Is it a grant or a loan?
Well, no, it can't be free money. World Bank doesn't give free money.
No, I just thought to know because some media reportage of it has called it a grant.
It's not a largesse. It's not a largesse.
I'm just so that we're clear.
So
pay back.
What does that say about the future for us? And we asked him also about this intervention fund, bailout fund that the Nigerian government says is going to give to Nigerian universities, 320 billion. But ASU is saying, look, out of this money, you can't account for 41% of it. Is it for bureaucracy? What is it for? Okay, so let me start with you, Professor Aworawo, because when I saw that billions will go to the tertiary sector through TED fund, I said Professor Aworawo will be very happy.
Well, I agree with, I share the ASU point of view that 320 billion, which already is insufficient, inadequate. And then out of it, when we calculate, how the thing will be shared, 186 billion will go to the universities. The 132 billion cannot be accounted for 41%. Of course, logically, the question, arises. The 132 billion, what is it meant for? There is no answer to that question. And there has to be an answer. Because we know that the universities are in dire straits. So many things that are needed for the university to function at par with, similar institutions across the world are not there. The government carried out, that assessment, the needs assessment for the universities a couple of years ago. And the government saw that, there is this deficiency, if you like, infrastructure deficiency in the universities. And, took steps to say, okay, every year we'll make available this much amount of money to be able to, address these problems. Now that we have this, 320 billion approved, it only makes sense that the entire money will be made available so that the universities can begin to, infrastructure can improve. We can begin to, move, try to catch up with others that we are far behind. So it's a legitimate question. But I also agree with Mr. Onyekwere that, yes, the 132 billion TED fund will have to account for the money, bring more money, so to speak, not even just accounting for, so that these problems can be addressed. The second layer on this matter is how the universities spend this money. The 2013 intervention that President Jonathan did was very effective. It was very effective because of the way the money was managed. Before then, monies had come to the university that nobody knew about. The money simply disappears. The corruption that we see everywhere is also in the university. It's everywhere, just everywhere. In TED fund, in the university, everywhere. But there was an effective way that the one of 2013 was managed. The money was made available. A committee was set up. The money was not given to any university. It was kept in CBN. The project will have to be identified, what you want to do with your own, and then the committee will manage the money. ASU was part of it. Education Ministry was part of it. The Ministry of Finance was part of it. So nobody could go away with anything. My own faculty benefited tremendously. Our lift program wasn't working well. The entire building was dilapidated. There was total overhaul of that building because of the way the money was managed. So I agree with Onyekwere that the one ASU is complaining about, the one the university, the one with TED fund, has to be brought because the problems are too extensive to keep any money. And then when the money comes, this share of 1.something billion to universities, we will not see anything. I can say categorically, we should go and study how that 2013 money was managed so that this 320 billion can have value. Otherwise, 2-3 years down the line, we'll come and tell the story that we didn't see anything with that money. So I agree with Onyekwere in saying that ASU has done well by raising the issue regarding 4%.
About the greed of ASU, because when Professor Emmanuel Osodeke, yes, we tried to get him onto this program, but he says he's in somewhere in Umuahia. I don't think they have internet in Umuahia. But, he was saying the universities should get more money. So there's competition for resources.
The universities, there would always be a reasonable way of getting these things shared. What has happened over the years is that we have had more universities established and less polytechnic and college of education. So that percentage, what you see is that what each polytechnic gets is almost more than what universities get, because we have not established more, many college of education and polytechnics. So those percentages they used to share, you discover that the polytechnic is getting far more than universities get, because we have had more universities established and not so many, college of education and polytechnics. So there is a need to, do a reasonable analysis. Who gets what? That should not be a problem. The main problem is, how will this money be managed? I keep saying because I know what I'm saying. How will this money be managed? From TED fund to university, we will see nothing. If an ingenious way of managing this money is not, put on the table and, the whole thing is administered in that way. That is the greater concern.
Okay, Yemi, Adamolekun.
So let me ask a question. So in 2013, you said your building was renovated from that fund.
It was totally transformed. Come to Faculty of Art to see it.
It's been a decade. Yes. Has anything else happened since then?
Well, no, we haven't got any more money allocated since then, so the building is, but at least things are still functional.
But the point I was trying to make is also just the way we approach maintenance. So it's when we get an influx of money, we do things, but we don't have a culture of maintaining. Buildings shouldn't be maintained when there's an influx. They should be maintained because we value education and we want students to learn in a conducive environment, not just about your department. But the general approach that we have to tertiary education in Nigeria, quality education cannot be free. And to the point, I think it was Mr. Onyekwere that made the point earlier, we can't fund the universities we have, but we're setting up universities like party packs, because every state must have one. By the time we are done, every local government, well, maybe every senatorial district or every local government will have one. That's not the essence of tertiary education. So again, to Professor Akinterewa's frequent point about our dishonesty in how we are dealing with these issues that we see in how this thing is done. Just to agree with Mr. Onyekwere that there's no need to set up new universities.
There is no need, absolutely no need.
Ife, for example, is sitting on enough land to build, if I'm be conservative, 2 Ifes. And so you're just adding capacity to what already exists, because the land is there. The land is even of interest to a certain traditional ruler that I'll just leave it like that, because there's land. Aderemi, when Awolowo set up Ife, just gave Awolowo land. He says, you want to come? Fine, here you go. So Ife is sitting on significant enough land that you can just triple the size of Ife, and therefore you don't have the need to recreate what you would do with a new university. But again, as a people, government, ASU, whatever, we're not honest about, not one, the quality of education we're trying to get, and two, the cost of education. And this ties to the issue that we're having with medical students. I completely agree that medical education is 100% subsidized. Maybe not 100%, but it's significantly subsidized because, again, and I'm sure you can testify to this, what it costs to educate students is not what students are paying.
Of course.
So rather than having an honest conversation.
Yeah, but people say education is a fundamental right.
Fundamental rights. Primary education is a fundamental
right
right.
to
Medical
education.
school education is not a fundamental right.
Okay.
So you have a right to it because it's available. But then let's talk about how it gets paid for.
So are you saying you agree with the House of Reps Johnson proposal that if you get medical education, you stay in bondage for 5 years?
No. I'm agreeing that it's subsidized, but I'm also saying that back to this same point about dishonesty, that we want to legislate how we now want to get our value back. Okay, so the student that goes to Afe Babalola, that one too should be in bondage for 5 years. So how do you separate who went to a private school and who goes to a public school? You don't license me, so what does that mean in terms of working? Does that mean I can't really work? Does the person who's hiring me then ask questions? It's just not well thought out because we're leaving the fundamentals about why people are leaving. People are leaving because their learning environment is poor, their practicing environment is poor, the return on their time and their investment in education is poor. We're not talking about that. But the same National Assembly members that want to legislate how medical school students suffer through medical education will get on a plane, as you rightly said, to go and treat a toothache. So that one is okay. We shouldn't legislate the fact that those who are subsidized by our taxes should use our facilities. We're not legislating that one. And I really like, you said earlier that we tried to get Mr. Oloriegbe to come. I'm quite glad that he's chairman of the health committee in the Senate. So I have hopes that this bill will die in the Senate because he doesn't support it. And he raises very fundamental points. For example, he says, and I'll read a few of the points he raised in his response to this. When does the 5-year period start? Before or after the housemanship? What sort of license will be awarded to a fully trained doctor instead of a full license to practice under the proposal? Is there going to be a limit in the doctor's scope of practice? So you can do some things, you can't do some things. And to what extent are the limits during the 5 years waiting period? And we need to establish why we are putting such limits. Is it for lack of skills or political expediency? What happens after the 5 years of denial of rights to practice? So I think these are fundamental issues for me that just speaks to the fact that we're trying to solve a problem on the surface without dealing with the root cause. And then lastly, and then this whole point about this, Mr. Oloriegbe's point, I think it's significant. So you sit in the House of Rep, decide you want to pass a bill, you know that the process is that it will go to Senate, but you don't think it's expedient to consult the chairman of the committee of a bill you are trying to pass. I mean, that, for me, if it was women, when women were trying to do our bills last year, they said we didn't consult enough, we didn't talk, so we see. Anyway, and then to the gentleman from Aworawo that spoke, I just wanted to really commend his spirit around losing. He was very clear that there was a labor wave, and that in a sense he couldn't compete with it, but also spoke very well about the fact that they voted for me before. So this is not about twice exactly, and also he was a local councillor exactly. That I've benefited. I'm not indigenously Lagos, but I've benefited from the people in my constituency. So nobody took me to court. So now that I've lost, why would I take anyone to court? But I will challenge him that he's PDP, the governing party is APC, the constituency is now Labour. That he maybe is in a unique position to convene a conversation. So I mean, I think. He then maybe spoke a bit, maybe hopefully, that everything is fine, everything will go back to normal. I think we need to have these conversations. And I think he's in a very unique place to have that, straddling the different parties.
Honorable Emmanuel Ego insists that he's a Lagosian.
Exactly.
So
very
he
important.
he may be a non-indigent, but he says this same Lagos belongs to all of us.
I don't know whether I can make a couple of comments on Ego's.
Okay, I wanted Professor Akintenewa, who is in our London studio to join us. And then I'll come back to you. Professor Akintenewa, are you there? Well, you are in the London studio.
Yes, the boy is here.
Did you say what? This
I
is the boy.
subscribe to the...
You mean the grandpa is here?
Yes, the boy is here in London. And the boy is good.
Okay, if you say so.
Now, Emmanuel Eagle made a central point of submission that the bill is not good for Nigeria. And I agree with him for the 4 reasons he gave. He was telling us about, discrimination on the part of graduates from private institutions. He talked about, housemanship being difficult for many of them. And he also talked about, money coming from diaspora medical doctors and so on and so forth. I agree with him. The point of particular interest is his redefinition of the concept of brain drain, and it is quite creative. Brain drain, the way we know it, is the movement of the holder of knowledge, people of knowledge, moving physically out of Nigeria, now going to work elsewhere. That is the classical meaning of a brain drain. But Emmanuel Eagle has told us that no, brain drain should not be seen in that classical context. That the brain itself is here in Nigeria, and the draining of the brain is here in Nigeria. This is the problematic. So it is not the act of moving out, traveling out, ordering yourself out, or japping out that should be seen as a dynamic of, brain drain. So the mere fact that he has identified the draining of brain here in Nigeria as the problematic, then when talking about solution, finding solution, that means that you must stop the draining of the brain in Nigeria. I find that one quite interesting. The issue now is looking at how, for instance, we can now understand the contents of the draining. How are we going to address the problem? That is a challenge that he has thrown open. I think that at the level of Eze Onyekere, he made some points that I also do agree with. He addressed the issue of a subsidy removal, and he also talked about the tertiary.
Please go ahead. Hello, Prof. Go ahead.
Tertiary.
Anyway, when you're talking about corruption, yes.
Oh, looks like we lost connection there with Professor Akintenwa. But okay, let's come back to you very quickly, Professor Aworawo. You wanted to respond to some of the things that Yemi said.
Exactly. I wanted to comment on some issues raised by Emmanuel Eagle, who, by the way, is my very good friend. Yes, my last time in Abuja, he carried me everywhere. He's my very good friend. Yes, I like
You are not from Amuwodofin.
I'm not from Amuwodofin. I like his spirit, that I've lost the election, I've taken it with philosophical calmness, I've moved on, I won't go to court. But we should make an addendum to that. And that is that he has taken it in that light because he knows he lost the election.
Exactly.
He lost the election fairly.
Exactly.
He even said if he had a 10 billion naira, he will not win the election because the wave was Labour. So I agree with his spirit, and I would urge more of politicians to, imbibe that spirit. But we should make it easier for them to accept defeat when the elections are free, fair, and credible. Yeah. Then the second point he made, which has to, which relates to nation building, ethnicity, that the House of Reps, person that won, is not Igbo. The House of Assembly, one of them is Edo, the other one is also Yoruba. So if the target was the Igbo wanted to go and vote a fellow Igbo, that was not the case. It was a case of supporters for Labour Party. It was not, ethnicity as such. So people were trying to disrupt and suppress votes. They didn't even see the underlying issue in those who were going to vote. They were just going to vote the political party. Not because the person was of their ethnic group or one other ethnic group.
No, the way they framed it is that they profiled a Labour voter. So a Labour voter could be Igbo, most likely Igbo, could be a young Yoruba person, or could be in certain demographics in Lagos. So you're quite right that the suppression wasn't just, but the ethnicity was part of it. The suppression wasn't just about ethnicity because there were Yoruba people that were prevented from voting.
Okay.
Yeah, certainly.
So, and these are things that, we should leave above. Yeah. He also said he has spoken with the APC government and that measures should be taken to heal the wounds so that it will be, easy for Nigerians to move, Lagosians to move on and focus on development. And not be bogged down by the aftermath of the election.
Really quickly on that, because he made the point, he said he spoke to the APC government and they said, they were quite apologetic and they said it would not happen again. I believe two things. One, there must be consequences. For people who deliberately hurt, killed, maimed, harassed, that there should be consequences. But again, also my point around him being in a position to have a conversation. And then his last point about brain drain, he tried to spin it. But you can't, people will not flood back to Nigeria. The parallel to India, I think, was a bit off. People will not flood back to a country that doesn't have an enabling environment that they will thrive in. And so until we do that, we shouldn't expect people to come back.
The lesson of it is that all of us should just conduct ourselves in politics or in anything as decent people.
Exactly.
You meet on the level, you part on the square, fair and square, okay? Even in politics. So I note your commendation of your good friend, Honorable Ego. Is Professor Akintenewa back there from London? Okay, he's not there. While we wait to reconnect with him, let's take this next subject. Former President Olusegun Obasanjo this past week wrote to a court in the kingdom, that's in England, which found former Deputy Senate President Ike Ekweremadu and his wife and the doctor guilty of organ trafficking. In the letter addressed to the chief clerk at the Central Criminal Court, Old Bailey, Obasanjo asked the clerk to intervene. The letter by the former president read in part. He says, "It is my fervent desire for very warm relations between the United Kingdom and the Federal Republic of Nigeria, for his position as one of the distinguished senators in the Nigerian parliament, and also for the sake of their daughter in question, whose current health condition is in danger and requires urgent medical attention. You will use your good offices to intervene and appeal to the court and the government of the United Kingdom to be magnanimous enough to temper justice with mercy. Ekweremadu is at the risk of being sentenced to 10 years imprisonment, in line with the Modern Slavery Act of 2015 of the United Kingdom." Yemi Adamolekun, let me start with you. What do you think of this intervention, this character evidence offered by President Olusegun Obasanjo?
Well, I'm of two minds. I can understand it, and I think it's not out of character for General Obasanjo. But I think also, the letter was a bit too glowing, because it basically painted Ekweremadu as a man above board who made a mistake because his daughter was ill. But if I'm not mistaken, Ekweremadu is under investigation by the EFCC for corruption. They were going to forfeit his assets while he was in jail. He had to go to court for that. So I think for me, you can write a letter as a former president, someone who knew someone, and say temper justice with mercy because of his daughter and the circumstances. But I think trying to then paint him as a man that's, in a sense, above board was where I draw the line. And
but Ekwuemadu has not been convicted anywhere.
I'm not saying
in
Nigeria. But I did say charges.
It's not a convicted person.
Did I say convicted? I said charges.
In Nigeria.
I said charges. I did not say convicted. I said charges. But the charges are there.
So if you are indicted, it doesn't mean you have been convicted.
I did not say that, but I did say charges, and I'm clear. And I'm saying so because if there was nothing to charge you with, you will not be charged.
No, sometimes people charge people, they indict people, and it will come to nothing.
Nothing. Okay. Well, we also
that's what the law says.
We also know our court system. But as I said, I'm not surprised that he would do that. I'm not sure that it's the best use of his office in this case, because there are questions that we haven't answered when we've talked about this, where someone who is a lawyer of Ekwuemadu's status did not pay attention to the laws of the land when he clearly could have gotten this another way. And so if, as Nigerians say, the anyhowness of Nigeria that you took abroad and you've now gotten caught and roped in your wife and your daughter is now in the hospital based on it, yes, there are what's it called? Well, there's a word for not humanitarian. There's an English word about showing mercy that should be considered, but that's my take.
Okay, Professor Aworawo.
Yeah, I commented on this a fortnight ago, and I said I felt very sorry for Ekwuemadu. It seemed that myself and General Obasanjo are on the same pedestal on this because of his daughter. If he had just gone to
General, Chief or President?
Retired General. Is that okay?
Okay, that's fine.
You know, he said temper justice with mercy. Before he made that statement, he also said that he doesn't condone what Ekwuemadu had done, and that clearly he acted, unlawfully. But despite all that, given why he did or he tried to do what he tried to do,
yeah, that's
the daughter especially, he will urge the court to temper justice with mercy. I think that is just fair enough. I also don't think that he tried to paint Ekwuemadu in glowing. He only said he has contributed to national development, in different areas.
Full 2-page letter.
Not above board as such. I'm not sure he used that language. But he just said, as a man who has contributed to, Nigeria's development in different areas and all. So I think the letter is in order. And what I just want to, add to that, I think the Nigerian government could have also done more to assist Ekwuemadu.
How?
When things like this happen, you don't think too much of whether the person is culpable or not. You just want to defend and protect yourself. Look at the United States. The lady, the basketballer who went to Russia, she had marijuana, even though it is clear that is illegal. But that didn't make the American government to abandon her. They still went and, in fact, they released someone of high price to the United States to get that lady, away from Russia. So when somebody, once it's your citizen, you try to do, when you come back home, you can box yourself, you can, berate and all that. But as long as your citizen, the person is abroad, you do everything to defend, protect, and reduce the person's, tension. When the person comes home, then you can sort yourself.
Do you think the US would have done the same thing if it were the UK, for example? Because I think the country also matters of where the citizen was arrested. That's number one. Number two, in defense of the Nigerian government, at least the timeline that I've seen, the documents that were required to, for example, when they said it was a minor, the immigration provided documents to show that at the time that the passport was applied for, the gentleman was not a minor. So the Nigerian government, in defense of them, actually did support in the way that they could by what was required of them.
Okay, no. What Professor Aworawo is pointing out, the basketball star, Brittany Griner,
yes.
I think, the U.S. stepped in.
And I said the country also matters, which is why I started with if it were the UK.
When Mark Thatcher had issues in Congo,
a country
about organizing a coup,
the country again,
the UK stepped in to protect Mark Thatcher. When it happened in Nigeria was the same country trying to provide evidence, but the same Nigerian government. When we had people who had drug issues in Saudi Arabia and elsewhere, the same Nigerian government stepped in to protect them.
Kill the person. That's it.
Yeah.
That's so it matters.
So
that's all I'm saying. You're confirming what I'm saying.
No, I'm not confirming what you're saying. what Nigerians are saying is that why does the Nigerian government choose and pick whose interests the country defends? But I'm not.
Other countries not do that?
I'm not making an argument here. Let's go back to Professor Akintenwa. Professor Akintenwa, I understand you are back in the studio in London. We missed you briefly.
Yes, thank you for the connection. On Chief Obasanjo's letter, I already provided the textual analysis of the letter in my column today, Via International. It's a welcome letter. Welcome because it falls within the framework of citizen diplomacy, which the government of Nigeria has not been able to take advantage of. Citizen diplomacy complements official diplomacy. People to people, citizen to citizen. Now, Obasanjo has done very well by taking advantage of this, not writing directly to the government of the United Kingdom, but going through a person he knows, through the chief clerk, and whatever will be the outcome, at least this is how we can promote citizen diplomacy within the framework of projection and advancement of Nigeria's foreign policy interests. Secondly, Chief Obasanjo is asking for leniency, tempering justice with mercy. I agree, but I think that the sentencing can be mitigated, but the likelihood of outright total pardoning seems to be remote. Again, I do not see how pardoning of Ekweremadu can seriously enhance the bilateral ties between the United Kingdom and Nigeria, because of the well-known dynamics of the relationship, which are more serious than issue of a judicial matter. More importantly, the letter has not addressed how to actually address the kidney problem of Ekweremadu's daughter. And this one should be a point that will be further stressed to the government of United Kingdom, because if Ekweremadu is sentenced and the wife is sentenced, then who will be outside to look after? Chief Obasanjo accepted that Ekweremadu is at fault. He has even said that the offense is not tenable in any civilized society. So he knows that Ekweremadu did not do well. But now he is now asking for the court to be godly, to temper justice. We know he's at fault, but he's asking for God's forgiveness through the court. So, and I think the British should listen to that and save the life of the daughter, per se.
Prof, well, before we lost connection with you earlier on, I wanted you to comment on the fact that the Nigerian government is providing intervention fund for the universities, $320 billion. But, you know, as you say, look, that money, there are issues about transparency, accountability, and distribution. Very briefly, so that we can take our final topic, which is an international relations topic, Finland joining NATO.
Hello, are you asking me?
Yes. Hello, Prof, can you hear me?
Yes, you are talking about ASU, an intervention fund.
Yes, yes. Briefly, so that we can take our final topic.
What is the question? Because I was not hearing.
No, I asked you one of the issues we discussed with Yekpere was the intervention fund of about $320 billion that the Nigerian government is providing. ASU says 41% of that money, they don't have any clarity as to what government wants to do about it. ASU wants more money, of course, naturally. But, what do you think of that intervention? And Professor Aworawo here had said earlier on that, look, the last time government intervened was more than a decade ago.
Well, you see, the most unfortunate thing we will always say, if the bloodstream of every Nigerian leader, Minister of Education, Minister of Finance, you see, our blood is always tainted with dishonesty. And if it is not dishonesty, it is tainted with refusal to be accountable, to be transparent. Now, we needed an ASU leader to do computation to say that 540 million per annum is what should be incurred. That 41% is still hidden somewhere. No information about that. Why? Why? Onyekwere is saying that 50% should be invested. Why should we talk about investing any money there when the 540 billion was meant for 2023? So give the 540 billion to the universities. Don't put money there so that you will now be generating interest and be spending it. Governance in Nigeria, you see, is driven by debt management, loan management. If you are approving money for university, give the money to the university. So there's no need keeping any money. Why are we always having this attitude of dishonesty, transparent dishonesty? This is the problem. There can never be educational progress where we have this dishonest approach to life. And now our President Buhari is going away. Every time he sleeps, he's thinking of loan. He wakes up, he's thinking of loan. Why must you take money from the World Bank in order for you to pay for palliatives subsidy? No, really. We must stop all these taking Nigerians for granted. It is most unfortunate and most unacceptable.
Well, thank you. You say you are the good boy in London. But I say you are the grandpa in London, in our studio in London. But quickly, let's take our final subject of the day. Finland has formally joined the NATO military alliance. It took the decision to apply for membership and ditch its neutrality in response to Russia's invasion of Ukraine. The Finnish flag has now been raised outside NATO headquarters in Brussels for the first time, joining 30 other countries. The alliance, the head of the alliance, Jens Stoltenberg, described it as a good day for Finland and for NATO. He's also expressed confidence that Sweden, which applied to join at the same time, will soon be a member too, though that still depends on Turkey. Finland's president attended the short ceremony alongside foreign ministers from all NATO members. Moscow says it will boost its own military presence in the region in response, and that there will be consequences. Very briefly, we have limited time. Professor Aworawo, let me start with you. Finland, 31st member. Sweden, possibly on its way to join NATO. What are the implications for global stability?
Well, I will link the Finland joining NATO to Russia's invasion of Ukraine. The success of Finland to join NATO this past week has established that Russia's invasion of Ukraine is a strategic failure. Because the major reason given by Russia is that Russia doesn't want NATO's presence, around her, in any of the neighboring states. And since there was this feeling that Ukraine would join NATO and, of course, also the EU, there was a need to invade Ukraine to stop that. Now that Finland has joined, Sweden will soon join. What Russia sought to prevent by invading Ukraine is not happening. Will Russia now declare war on Finland and soon also declare war on Sweden? So for those countries, it is good because before now they had respected Russia by remaining neutral, not joining NATO. Let's maintain a gentlemanly disposition and live peacefully. But with Russian aggression, they are now compelled to join NATO to seek protection. So it is good for NATO, it's good for Finland, it will be good for Sweden if it joins, but very bad for Russia.
Yemi, briefly.
I mean, just to add to that, and I think for me the significance of the fact that with Finland joining, because of Finland's border with Russia, it's now doubled NATO's
830 miles.
Exactly.
830 miles extra.
Yeah. So I mean, just really do agree, and it'll be interesting to then see kind of how Russia decides to respond, and also the importance of, yes, there's a place for neutrality, but when decisions need to be made for interest of yourself or others, that can shift. And what, in less than a year, Finland went through the process of joining NATO. Yeah.
Okay, except that Finland also had to make certain concessions to Turkey because they were at it for about a year. Yeah. They had to make concessions with regard to arms, deals.
I'm expecting Prof too.
With yes, but Professor Akintenewa, and for the benefit of our viewers, Professor Akintenewa's article is at page 56 of This Day newspaper today. This Day, the Sunday newspaper. Again, humility in diplomacy. Olusegun Obasanjo's letter and Donald Trump's indictment. And it's a full-page commentary on some of the issues we've been looking at on this program. Professor Akintenewa, briefly, so that we can go.
You see, when the NATO was established in 1949, the main objective is to use it as a mechanism for collective security. Sweden, Finland, Switzerland, they didn't join. So the implication of Finland now acceding to the NATO protocol means an end to neutrality. Neutrality has been a basis for security of Finland before now. But the maintenance of the Finnish security with NATO is another issue. The second point is that Finland has been accepted as a full-fledged member, implying now that Finland will continue to accept the NATO commander instructions. You know, France refused to accept automatically the military integration. Don't forget that the headquarters of NATO used to be Paris. And this is the current University of Paris-Dauphine. But the French refused to take the dictates of America. That was why the capital was moved to Brussels. Now full-fledged membership of Finland means Finland has moved from invitee status to full membership. Finally, with or without Sweden coming in, I think the membership of Finland is by default. and expression of distrust in Russia. So I agree with Professor Aworawo by saying, linking it to the misunderstanding between Russia and the NATO countries. But Ukraine is most likely to suffer most in the whole process.
Well, thank you very much, Professor Akintenewa. What's that song again by Taylor Swift, right? I'm a wonderful boy in London. Anyway, thank you very much for joining us from our London studio, our Rice News studio in London. And thank you, Professor Aworawo. Thank you also, Yemi Adamolekun. You've been watching This Day Live, this Sunday talk show, here on our Rice News. I'm Ruben Abati. From our entire team here in Lagos, it's bye for now, and thank you very much for watching.